In a year already defined by global power realignments and economic uncertainty, one project may quietly redraw the lines of world trade forever. It doesn't roar like a missile test. It doesn't flash like a stock market crash. It makes sound quietly, across 5,000 kilometers of jungle, mountain, and desert. A railway, but not just any railway. This is the China-backed Two Oceans Railway, a $60 billion project reviving a decades-old dream to connect the Atlantic coast of Brazil to the Pacific coast of Peru. If completed, it will sidestep the Panama Canal, reduce shipping costs, rewrite maritime trade routes, and give China its most powerful trade weapon yet against U.S. control. And in 2025, it just came back from the dead. So how did a stalled rail dream turn into Beijing's most dangerous move yet in the Americas? And why is Washington suddenly whispering the words, economic containment breach? In this video, let's find out. China's dominance in global manufacturing is unquestionable. But behind its industrial might lies a fragile secret, one that could be shattered by geography and geopolitics. Over 90% of China's trade flows through sea routes, and two choke points, the Strait of Malacca and the Panama Canal, form the backbone of its logistics chain. The Strait of Malacca, barely 2.8 kilometers wide at its narrowest, sees 60% of China's sea-based trade. Any disruption here, be it military conflict, piracy, or port blockage, would sever the artery feeding China's economic heart. Add the Panama Canal to the equation, a critical link between China and Latin American markets, where 21% of Chinese ships transit annually, and you have a recipe for strategic anxiety. That anxiety turned into a policy crisis in February 2025, when the U.S. President Donald Trump declared plans to retake control over Panama Canal logistics. The threat was clear. America could weaponize geography, hike tariffs, and squeeze China's maritime lifelines. For Beijing, this wasn't a distant threat. It was a declaration. But China didn't retaliate through confrontation. It responded with a strategy by laying steel across the soil. Not water, but land. Not warships, but railways. The answer was buried deep within South America. Beijing's counteroffensive came in the form of an iron artery, the Two Oceans Railway. A project so massive, so transformative, it could reorder global trade routes overnight. Designed to cut through South America from Peru's Pacific coast to Brazil's Atlantic seaboard, this 5,000-kilometer railway bypasses the U.S. patrolled waters entirely. Over 3,000 kilometers of this corridor must be built from scratch, carving through tropical rainforests, ascending the Andes, and threading through diverse ecosystems. The budget? At least $60 billion. If expanded to include upgraded port infrastructure and feeder lines, costs could approach $80 billion, a sum greater than the GDP of countries like Sri Lanka or Ethiopia. But why is China risking so much? Because control of trade isn't just about money, it's about leverage. A successful Two Oceans Railway would offer Beijing an uninterrupted link to vital South American resources. It would cut logistics times from 60 days to just 25 to 30 days, while slashing costs by up to a third. It would also mean China could import South American soybeans, beef, and copper without worrying about U.S. naval routes or Panama toll increases. This isn't just about bypassing a canal. It's about breaking a stranglehold. But grand visions don't erase painful history. The dream of a transcontinental South American railway is not new. It has haunted generations of planners since the 1960s. Time after time, it ran into the same barricades. Dense Amazon jungles, the impenetrable Andes, budget black holes, and opposition from indigenous communities. The first serious attempt came in 2014, when China, Brazil, and Peru signed a cooperation framework. Optimism surged. feasibility studies began. But within 2 years, the project unraveled again. Indigenous rights groups mobilized. Environmental watchdogs sounded the alarm over biodiversity loss. Then, political instability in Brazil and Peru, with Washington's behind-the-scenes lobbying, stalled the plan indefinitely. It took something bigger to revive it. That something was Trump's tariffs. As Washington escalated its economic war with Beijing, China wanted new suppliers. Brazil's soybeans and Peru's copper became lifelines. Suddenly, what once looked like a vanity megaproject started to resemble a national security imperative. By 2025, China's Belt and Road engineers were back. This time not just with ideas, but with capital, designs, and bulldozers. With Changshe Port already operational and cutting 10 days off the Pacific-Asia shipping route, the Western anchor was ready. The next phase? Push east to Rio and drive a railway straight through America's backyard, one rail tie at a time. By the time Chinese engineers landed in Brazil in 2025 to resurvey the terrain, the narrative had already shifted. This wasn't just a comeback for a stalled railway. It was China's quiet declaration that it no longer asked permission. It built alternatives. And it wasn't bluster. It was a strategy backed by decades of concrete, steel, and precision tunneling experience. What separates this Chinese initiative from earlier dreams of a South American transcontinental railway is that Beijing has already done this, just not here. From Kenya's standard gauge railway slicing across savannas to the high-speed line linking Laos and China across mountains and rivers, China's playbook is proven: fund, build, and integrate. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. Even in the most hostile terrains, China hasn't blinked. The Lhasa-Nyingchi line in Tibet, opened in 2021, crosses the Yarlung-Changpo Grand Canyon, dubbed the deepest canyon on Earth, at elevations exceeding 3,000 meters. The route punched through solid rock and unstable slopes using high-altitude tunneling, a feat once thought impossible. The Andes, as intimidating as they are, present a challenge that Chinese engineers have already simulated and solved elsewhere. But terrain is only half the battle. The other half is perception. Previous iterations of this railway stalled not just due to jungles and mountains, but also because of legitimate concerns from indigenous groups and environmentalists. Amazon isn't just land. It's sacred. Indigenous tribes, some uncontacted, see rail lines not as infrastructure, but as an invasion. The Brazilian state of Acre, for example, holds some of the densest clusters of isolated tribes in the world. Without consultation and sensitivity, the project could ignite a firestorm. That's where China's newer playbook comes in. Beijing has adapted, not only in steel and stone, but in optics. In its latest mega-projects across Central Asia and East Africa, China began incorporating green engineering methods, wildlife corridors that allow animals to pass under or over tracks, low-noise tunnel boring to reduce acoustic disruption, and rerouting to preserve culturally sensitive areas. These aren't concessions. They are insurance policies against protests, lawsuits, and international backlash. In Brazil and Peru, these same strategies are being introduced early. Preliminary blueprints now include consultation with environmental NGOs and participation by local engineers and indigenous representatives. This is a pivot not seen in past Belt and Road projects, and one that suggests China is learning that legitimacy matters almost as much as logistics. But even more powerful than engineering or diplomacy is China's ace card: money. To revive the railway, China injected capital through multiple channels. the China-Brazil Capacity Cooperation Fund, worth $20 billion, with Beijing contributing $15 billion, is already earmarked for joint infrastructure. The China-Latin America Cooperation Fund has pumped billions more into the region. Add in credit lines from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and what you get is a self-contained financial ecosystem. One that doesn't involve the IMF, doesn't need World Bank approval, and doesn't come with lectures about democracy or governance. This independence is a lifeline to South American nations long stuck between austerity packages and trade dependency. It's not just China building a railway, it's Brazil and Peru seeing an exit ramp from Western economic oversight. In other words, China isn't just laying rails, it's laying roots. And those roots are growing in the cracks of an old global order. As bulldozers roll through the jungles of Acre, and engineers chart elevations in the Andes, alarm bells are ringing far beyond Brazil or Peru. They are echoing through Washington, Brussels, and Tokyo. Because this isn't just about trains, it's about tectonic shifts. What the US once took for granted, that Latin America was its strategic backyard, is now being redrawn with Chinese ink. In the 20th century, America's Monroe Doctrine declared the Western Hemisphere off-limits to foreign interference. That policy shaped trade, military alliances, and even coup plots. But the Two Oceans Railway is physical evidence that those days are dead. It shows that the monopoly Washington once held over hemispheric infrastructure, finance, and influence is no longer enforceable, and perhaps no longer desired. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. While the US has been issuing press releases, China has been laying track. The consequences are already visible. Once completed, the Two Oceans Railway will cut export times between South America and Asia in half. The vast soybean fields of Brazil, which once moved sluggishly through Gulf ports or around Africa, will now feed directly into Chancay and ship straight to Shanghai. Copper from Peru, beef from Argentina, and lithium from Bolivia, all of it, will be placed on a rail line that doesn't require a single stop at US-controlled sea lanes. And what does that mean for the West? Leverage loss, tariff loss, strategic loss. When Trump weaponized tariffs in his first term, China took the hit and learned. It diversified. Brazil, not Iowa, is now China's top soybean supplier. Peru's copper exports to Asia have ballooned. And with this railway, China ensures that any future US attempt at economic coercion can simply be rerouted. Literally. But the pain runs deeper. Once this railway is fully operational, China won't just gain a logistics advantage. It gains a narrative advantage. It will be able to say to the world, look, while the US was retreating into tariffs and tantrums, we were building bridges and railways. It will say, when others closed ports, we opened tracks. In a battle for soft power, infrastructure beats ideology every time. And countries are noticing. Paraguay, Uruguay, and even Colombia are beginning to quietly explore what Chinese-backed connectivity could mean for them. And Beijing, ever patient, is watching, ready to scale this playbook across the continent. In response, the West faces a sobering dilemma. It can't compete on financing. It can't match construction timelines. And it has no counter-project on the horizon that rivals the scale and speed of the Two Oceans Railway. Which means the old levers of control, port access, shipping lanes, and naval positioning are growing weaker by the day. Even worse, this shift is happening without a single shot fired, without a single regime toppled, without a single freedom partnership declared. No soldiers, just surveyors, no sanctions, just steel. And it's not just about losing influence over South America. It's about losing control over the flow of global trade. Because once goods start bypassing the Panama Canal in favor of a Chinese-backed railway, tolls will drop, relevance will fade, and US ports will feel the sting. West Coast terminals from Los Angeles to Seattle, long feeders for Pacific trade, will face serious competition. And Latin America? It might finally stop asking for permission. What do you think will happen when global trade no longer needs the Panama Canal or the U.S. Navy? Isn't it true that China has silently taken the first step toward replacing the United States in solid terms? In the comments section below, share your thoughts on what happens if the United States becomes irrelevant to the world to trade. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.